Hey there, my name is Kelly, and this is Story in the Frame. I'm a director and a photographer, and each week here on the channel, I'll be discussing one of my nature or landscape photos in detail. I started this channel because it feels like we look at photos at high speed now, buzzing through them on an Instagram feed or flipping through pages in a book or a magazine before a root canal. But I really miss that feeling of being in a gallery and finding a print that nobody else is looking at and just dwelling on one image and letting it sink in, seeing how all those elements came together, and taking in the story that's captured in that frame. And so I invite you to join me for a few minutes as we just dwell in one image. The music you'll hear in the background is by one of my favorite composers, Robert Allaire. Check out his link in the description below. He's got really great stuff. This photo is called Gull on Flipped Iceberg. It was a top 10 finalist in the Nat Geo Nature Photographer of the Year in 2016. It was also a photo of the day and part of the Daily Dozen. I ended up in Alaska on this Nat Geo expedition because a few months before that I had worked on a show where I had really stressed myself out on it, and one day somebody had called me up and asked me for something so simple. They needed to go over to my house and they just needed my address, and I forgot it. I had lived in this place for 7 years and I forgot my own address. And so I started Googling, am I having a stroke? What's going on? And I discovered that it was stress related. And so that day, I just booked a trip to Alaska on this expedition because I knew as soon as this job was over, I needed to get out and just relax and take some photos of some animals. And so I got up to Alaska, and the boat took us out into Petersburg, which is where a lot of boats used to go and pick up ice from these glaciers because they would go out fishing thereafter and they would need ice to put the fish on. And so it was a place where you could pick up a lot of fresh ice and have it for your catch. And while we were in this cove, I spotted this bird that was on this flipped iceberg, and it was just so beautiful because the way the sun was hitting the ice was very unique that morning. It was cloudy, but this ice was being hit by a ray of sun, and behind this photo is trees. It's all dark pine trees, but it's in cloud cover, and so because of the exposure for the bird and the ice and the sun, that background really goes dark, and you feel like this moment is captured sometime in the evening or by moonlight because the blue tricks your eye. At least it was tricking my eye. But I really love how, although it's a broad daylight photo, the background feels like it's nighttime. And then this bird just ended up in this perfect place, and the boat I was on was moving left, and so the icebergs for me were moving right. And so I was shooting frames at high speed trying to catch just the right moment, and I saw this wedge coming up in the ice where that bird was going to be framed right in between, and so I just held down the trigger until I got that perfect framing as it came through, because I really liked how it made your eye go to that bird up there with the way that V shape was forming in the ice. And this ice is really unique because these icebergs, as they float out, they melt faster in the water than they do in the air, and so they flip over. They just flop right over, and that happens while you're out there. It's not like a mystery or anything. It'll happen right in front of your eyes, and you see these beautiful kind of golf ball shaped pits in them from where the ice has been melting and compressing on the underside. But then when it comes up, it's got little bits of food and stuff on it, and so the birds like to perch there and pick up a little bird snack or wait for other snacks to float up in the water nearby, and they all kind of pick their perch and float around. And this ice, the reason it's the color it is because of how condensed it is. The other wavelengths of light don't make it through, but the blue-green wavelength is a nice long wavelength, and so it's slower and can make it through the thick, dense ice. It's almost like a sculpture in its own right, and I really like that, and I like how this picture captures that shape and how it relates to the nature around it. In some of my other photos of this bay and other of my glacier photos, you can see how green the water is, and the water gets this color from the nutrients. As the glaciers melt, they pick up all this sediment and nutrients and they pull them down into the water, and so you get these really bright green colors, and they're really incredible, especially against the blue of the icebergs. You can't see it in this photo because of the reflection of the light, but in some of my other photos you can see how green that water is, and I really like that, knowing that there's so many nutrients in that water that's good for the animals. It's probably really bad to swim in for people, but it's good for the animals. While I was on this boat, I got to see a lot of humpback whales and killer whales, and there's just so many whales up in Alaska. And I met this guy who runs the Alaska Whale Foundation, and he was telling me that when sailors or ship captains call in about whales caught in their nets, he and his team of volunteers race out in these small boats to cut them free. And I thought it was so noble and such an amazing thing they were doing to go free these whales so that they didn't die as bycatch in these fishing nets. And when I got back, I printed some of these photos on metal and glass and wood, and I had a fundraiser at a little gallery opening for this Alaska Whale Foundation. And we raised a lot of money to send up to help with their endeavor of cutting these whales out of these fishing nets. But this particular photo was bought by my friend Lucas, and I had it printed on this beautiful glass, so it really brought the colors of the ice and the water up to the surface. It was a really beautiful print, but while they were hanging it, it fell and it broke. And the company that I had this printed with, I called them and I told them what happened, and that it was for this Alaska Whale Foundation, and it was a donation from a silent auction, and they sent me out a brand new one free of charge, and they said good luck saving the whales. And I thought that was so amazing how a lot of people, a lot of my friends, and even a lot of strangers that I didn't know kind of got together and loved this idea of helping out this volunteer organization that goes and saves the whales. This photo always makes me think about the glaciers, and how the glaciers I saw while I was in Alaska were all receding. I was with a bunch of other photographers. Many of them have been there for years and years and years, and they had these photos of where the ice used to be, and they would show me where that ice used to be, and that was where our boat was parked now. And that's a mile or more away from the face of where the glacier is, and so you could see how much change had taken place and how much melt had taken place. And I didn't fully grasp it just seeing photos side by side, but when I was there in the middle of this canyon and I could see how vast the distance was for only a few years of melting, it really struck me. And that's one part about the story of this photo that I really like, is that you get to see the ice and you get to see how beautiful it is, and you get to see how all of these creatures there depend on it for their food or somewhere to land while they're looking for food, or it's really a tight balance between what nature's doing with that ice and how everything uses it downstream. I guess let's get to some of the nerdy stuff. This photo was shot on a Panasonic GH4 camera, and it was shot at 1/1250th of a second, and it was shot at an ISO 400, and the f-stop was a 10, and it was just such a joy shooting with that little Panasonic GH4 because it was nice and light and it was fast. And that was something that was really important to me when I was up there shooting these animals, is I wanted a camera that would shoot fast and be light enough I could hike it in or have it on these boats and not worry about it getting wet or dirty. And so I was really happy I had that camera with me. It was a good camera for this trip. I really love this photo and the mood it puts me in, and I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive with me. Don't forget to slow down and take your time when you're looking through photographs. You might just find some hidden inspiration you've been needing. You can buy this print or one of my other prints at my photography website. It's kellyking.us, or you can just stop by over there and see if there's another photo of mine you'd like me to do a video on. If so, drop me a comment and let me know. Next week, let's go to Iceland.